So I'd like to start with acknowledging the land where I'm coming from, which is the Lekwungen speaking peoples and the Esquimalt and Songhees nations. And please, if you want to speak, or whoever is speaking wants to acknowledge where they're at, or you could put it in the chat, that would be great. I think it's, you know, it's important that we honor where we are and where we have the privilege of reading and joining like this, and to acknowledge that these lands are continuing. The people on these, the first peoples on these lands, are continuing to instruct us and show the way. So I also would like to thank our sponsors. So the BC Arts Council, the Province of BC, League of Canadian Poets, the Writers Union of Canada, the City of Victoria, the CRD, and the Canada Council for the Arts, for which we are in debt. Well, not so much in debt. We are indebted too. They might be in debt. Okay, so we're going to start off the evening because Doris is coming to us from Ottawa and it's late. We're going to start with our readers. So Terry Ann will start, and I'll just read you a little bit about Terry Ann. Terry Ann is a fantastic poet and paper artist, and the author of 7 collections of poetry, 2 haiku guidebooks, and 5 haiku chapbooks. She has edited 4 haiku anthologies. As past president of Haiku Canada, founder of and facilitator for Kodo Ottawa and Haiku Arbutus Victoria Study Group, she has given haiku and book arts workshops around the world. Her 8th collection, First I Fold the Mountain, from Black Moss Press, launches this spring, and I'm so looking forward to hearing what you have to bring us. Thanks, Terry Ann.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm coming to you from the Songhees and the Esquimalt people nation. I am thrilled to have this book, First I Fold the Mountain, launching in April from Black Moss Press, and that I'm going to read just a few poems from that collection. The book is inspired by this haiku. Bookmaker. First I fold the mountain, then the valley. Bookmaker. First I fold the mountain, then the valley. Grimoire. Women carried them in apron pockets, small enough to curve fingers around. A text in code. Some say the grimoire was for magic with a K. Such a small book forecasting spills. Spellbound, under a spell, a book to enchant. A Circes of a book falling open in my palms. Falling open to night rain. The memory of dark. This winter, the Christmas roses are blooming for the first time in my front garden, blooming with their slight flush of pink. I open my arms to them. The cool sea wind blows up from the harbor, and I bury my face in the spell of their planting, which I did with you last summer, your fingers frail beneath the rotting leaves. How we enjoyed the day, the dark falling on our shoulders like rain, clouds breaking open like seawater. On a line from David Sedaris. The line is, I never presumed Kennedy's death was responsible for my brother's breakdown, from When You Are Engulfed in Flames by David Sedaris. I never presumed that Kennedy's death was responsible for my brother's schizophrenia, although the splitting of his mind happened around the same time. The Dallas metaphor might have been a practical starting point for tracing the trajectory of his illness, his mathematical mind a speed trap for logarithms and formulas, a bullet shot from an infantry rifle, a telescopic lens. After his disappearance, I designed a small book called Greek Tragedy, pages from his college texts and personal notes photocopied onto gray, cloudless cover stock. The exactitude of his thinking, clearly an illusion for real life. I tried to understand his numbers, the foreign symbols, letting them speak to me across a distant grassy knoll, a swallow swoop of meaning, a cordoned candor through the clouds. One of the sections of the book is called The Unwritten Books, and it's from the concept of Jorge Luis Borges's short story, Library of Babel. The Library of Babel contains books that haven't been written yet. And I was so fascinated by this concept, the creativity of it, the magic of it, the mysticalness of it. And so I have a number of poems that are appearing in books that have not yet been written. Here's one, Ode to the Cello, from the Book of High and Low Registers, after Neruda. Into thin air, the cello sends a sound like the red arms of sumac stretching through starlight, like a river bending at dusk. The cello is an instrument of acceptance, a horse whisperer leaning into snow, the origin of crystals in the darkened cave. Thunder rolling through skylit peaks, the joy of whales in their humping season. Many have followed the cello road, Casals, Rostropovich, Dupre, and Ma, and Vedran Smalovic playing Albinoni's Adagio for 22 days outside the National Library, Sarajevo, surviving sniper fire, food shortages, the cold. Music for the cello lighting the darkest galaxies, Bach's 6 suites, Brahms' E minor and F major, concertos for Schumann, Saint-Saëns, Dvorak, and Elgar, the vibrato harmonics glissando of the left hand, and the picazzo legato of the right. Who knew the strength of carbon fiber would make a modern cello suitable for playing outdoors, resistant to temperature change? Some will remember Eleanor Rigby, Strawberry Fields, Atom Heart Mother by Pink Floyd, Aerosmith, Murdering by Death, Cursive, that contemporary edge of percussion, bebop squirt of lime jello, beatnik, snap, snap. Oh, cello, you give us the green light, the high five, thumbs up, the grinning peace sign, wear your heart on my sleeve. You are the Côte d'Azur, a Roberto Bernini film. You are too the tuna stretched on ice at the farmer's market, the comfortable suit of an old man's desire, the tender artichoke, intelligent wine upon the table. Oh, cello, you are the long and winding road home.
Wow, that was wonderful.
And I'd like to close with this upbeat, fun to read poem. Origami Ragtime Razzmatazz. The best way to beat those West Coast January blues, get the bends, get the paints and inks, get the origami folds for a down-home pop-up book. Clear the kitchen table, stock up the glue, Start those mountain valley creases. You know what to do. Sharpen the scissors. Don't count your losses. Don't complicate the rain. Just use those thumbnails like a bone folder. Ease on up. Cut, cut. A button for the cover. Maybe a new lover. Needles and threads. Corrugated cardboard. Knock those knees, baby. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Planet Earth Poetry.
Woo! Carrie Ann.
I forgot to mention that that Terry Ann is such a gifted musician as well. My God, not just in playing the piano, accompanying her poems, but also in her rhythmic changes and her honoring something like the cello and the last poem was, I wanted to get up and dance. Thank you so much, Terry Ann. That was wonderful. And I can probably speak for everyone that we're so looking forward to this new book of yours.
Thank you.
Our featured reader tonight is Doris Fisher. She's an Ottawa poet, and her debut collection, Locked in Different Alphabets by Silverbow Publishing, was nominated for the 2021 Archibald Lampman Award. She has 2 published chapbooks, The Binders and Sasanka, Wildflower. Awards include the 2017 John Newlove Award and Tree Press's 2016 Chapbook Award for The Binders. Also a nominee for the bpNichol Award. So welcome, Doris, all the way from Ottawa.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And it's great to be here and so nice to see all of you. And I see some familiar faces. Hi, Inara and Candace and Cynthia. So good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be reading at Planet Earth Poetry this evening from Ottawa and thrilled to be reading with Terry Ann Carter, who, as you know, was my poetry teacher for a short while in Ottawa and whose poetry I greatly admire. I also admire her as a person. I think she's amazing. She also inspired me to write haiku many, many years ago. I would like to thank Planet Earth Poetry for featuring me as a reader, and Zoe Dickinson for coordinating this event, and Nancy Isenman for hosting. I'm grateful to Candace James, publisher of Silverbow Publishing, for publishing my book and reaching out to Planet Earth to have me featured as a reader. And to everyone listening this evening, the poetry community in Victoria and Ottawa, my family and friends who have always been huge supporters of my work, and my husband, Bruce. Before I read, I would like to give you a little bit of background about the family I grew up in. My parents were immigrants from Poland, survived several World War II concentration camps. My mother served in the Polish Home Army. They emigrated to Canada 4 years after the Second World War, after living in a liberation camp in Germany. My brother George and I were born in Canada. My dad succeeded in saving many documents from their time in Nazi camps and after the war. He always hoped I would share their stories. Locked in Different Alphabets preserves many of my parents' narratives and reveals how their wartime experiences impacted our lives. My book is divided into 3 sections. I'm just going to show you my book. It's a beautiful cover designed by Candace James. And on the cover, you can see it's locked in different alphabets, the background, brown and gray, hieroglyphics in the background, and my name on the bottom. So it's divided into 3 sections, one on my brother George, one on my dad, and one on my mom. I'm going to read a few poems from each section. I will start by reading a few poems from the section on my brother. The first poem I'm going to read is Altar Voice. angelic in his black cassock and starched white surplice. George lights 6 high candles on the main altar. My brother loves playing with fire. He and Janusz take turns responding to the priest in Latin. George presents the bowl and pitcher, pours water over the priest's hands. Janusz unfolds a fresh towel, holds it while Father Twardowski dries his fingers. George swings the incense burner elatedly. Sweet scented smoke puffs out in clouds. The boys bow in unison each time the priest holds up bread and wine. George shakes the altar bells, a coveted duty. Janusz leans over and snatches them. A blaze of blasphemies and the brawl is on, bare knuckles at the altar. In his defense, George said, but it was my turn to ring the bells. The next poem I'm going to read is called Pyrolysis. After the time George set the kitchen curtains ablaze, I was afraid to be alone with him. He'd washed the ashes down the drain, waved away layers of gray haze that choked us both. My hands still shake when I strike a match. A whiff of smoke can sharpen my breath, hasten my step, make me think, escape. My next poem is called Treading Water. It started in the lake. My brother's elbows and hands held out of the water. Strengthens the legs and lungs, George said, skills acquired from his lifeguard summers. You were the golden girl. The word golden hung over the lake, a veil between us. I hated you most of the time. Mother loved you more. The past bubbled up from the lake's depths. Being golden had its price, I said. Nothing I do is good enough for Father. Even my degree is the wrong one. We swam closer to the truth that afternoon. It started in the lake listening to us laugh lightheartedly as children. The lake witnessing our bobbing bodies drawing closer, watching us float into gentler water. Though my brother offered me his hand, helped me onto the dock, and handed me a towel, everything familiar looked broken. The ground beneath me shaking. I'm going to read a few poems from the section about my dad. Now, my dad and I had what you could say a difficult and complex relationship, though loving. He often blamed things on me. Many of these poems in this section about my dad are addressed to him. The next poem I'm going to read is called Our Single. You blamed everything on me. That new doctor you recommended. A time bomb ticked behind the gloss of your charm and repertoire of jokes. Your laughter tumbling into brooding silence. You disapproved of my boyfriends and forced curfews, had me followed after I moved out. Blamed me. Your mother would still be alive if... We didn't speak for months, sometimes for years. Still, once long ago, we cut a single together of a Polish love song. You held my hand while we sang, your deep baritone in harmony with my 4-year-old soprano. You patted my head when we finished. Now, my parents like I mentioned in my intro, were both in concentration camps, and they met each other boarding a train on the way to a liberation camp in Germany. They lived there for 4 years, fell in love, got married, and came to Canada. Now, my mother and father had a very, very close relationship, and my father took it very hard when my mom died unexpectedly of a stroke at 69. He never recovered from that. The next poem is called Shawl. You were watching as she slept, and while you whispered her name, she disappeared. The 60 pounds you tried to lose when she was alive slipped off your bones. You couldn't stop listening to the incessant chatter of your radios, each one tuned to a different station. When you stayed up late, her voice still directed you to go to bed. Sorting her clothes, you presented me with her cherished black shawl, threaded with silver. I lost the love of my life. I saw you cry for the first time, sensed the brokenness in your step. Now, my dad was a collector, not only of the documents before and after the war, but a collector of anything you can imagine he had. Now, after my mom died, my dad got sick. He developed, first of all, diabetes, and then later in his 80s, Parkinson's, and had to go into a nursing home. The next poem is called Binders. We study your collection of 60 or more binders, brimming with documents, each one enshrined in a plastic sleeve. You explain certificates and government papers, the years spent in Nazi camps, wedding photos of you and mother, post-war Germany, the voyage to Canada on the General J.H. McCrae. You show me certificates and diplomas from your working days at Nortel. I'll bring most of these binders to the nursing home. You wind your 7 antique clocks. I'll need a few of my clocks. You linger over your collection of hand-painted china. I want some of my porcelain too. You describe a precision instrument from lab work at Nortel, a complicated-looking device that measures the width of a strand of hair. Do you want it? I'll take some of the clocks, mother's paintings, photo albums. I've changed my mind. I'm not going. I can't live in one room. We hang photos, antique clocks, hide toolboxes under the bed and in the closet, squeeze things into the dresser and night table. I'll need my teak bookcase for my binders. I cut up your hamburger, help you in and out of your chair. The next poem I'm going to read is called My Fault. I clean chocolate drippings from your chin, reposition your wheelchair and hold your cup so you can sip ginger ale and smooth your unruly hair with a damp brush. It's hard to understand your shaky whispers, but it's clearly my fault. You're in the wrong wheelchair. You always pointed out my flaws rather than praising me. The list of things of what I do wrong rings in my head. Yet, I'm told that you always ask others, did you meet my daughter? That's her picture on the wall. An extra bowl of chocolate gelato for dessert. His proud words fill my mouth with added sweetness. The next poem I'm going to read is called Lately, Everything is Language. A red wing evokes flushed cheeks. Translucent air reveals winter's landscape. A crow's unblinking eyes follow me from tree to tree as I walk. Branches wave in a different alphabet. Your voice murmurs through the pines. April is here again without you. The memory recalls all. Traces of mint candy, steaming cups of cocoa. My heart carries you. A noun, any noun, an anchor. I'm going to read a few poems now from my mother's section. And the first one I'm going to read is called I Knew, and it's introduced by an epigraph by Eleanor Fargian. The events of childhood do not pass, but repeat themselves like seasons of the year. I knew. Even in this fresh landscape, shadows veiled the sun. Wild flowers burnt to ashes. Overloaded plates of pierogi, pickled herring, and sauerkraut covered our table. Rows of Maxwell House jars, tins of habitant pea soup crammed our basement shelves. Dresses, price tags still attached, hung like war-starved ghosts in mother's closet. Now, my mother, as I told you in the introduction, as I mentioned, she lived through the Warsaw Uprising. And she kept a journal of her time through there. And sometimes in my book, I intersperse like snippets of what she said, like in Polish, and then translated into English. And she sometimes shared these stories with me. So the next poem is called My Mother Said. Before our home burnt down at 1 Mirowska Street in Warsaw, I sketched a song sparrow perched on the windowsill and collected clusters of blushing peonies in the backyard. Before my childhood snapped shut like a fox cage, I helped my mother cut dough circles for Christmas Eve pierogi, filled their centers with sauerkraut and mushrooms, and sealed their edges with my fingers. Before I ceased being that girl, Luba and I linked arms, crossed the street to the bakery, revealed a secret over plum-filled pastries and cocoa. After the bomb blast, I searched for traces of my father, found one leather glove smoldering. The next poem is called Słoneczko. I'm fine, I always said, whenever my parents asked. Father held me tight on the bobsled. Mother's love, a hefty wool blanket that warmed our home. Still, they couldn't shield me from their wartime trauma, though I wasn't starved in Nazi camps, forced to labor from daybreak to dusk. I knew nothing of hungering for a country or weeping for those who had perished. Grief shadowed them from room to room. I'm fine, little ray of sunshine, my mother's endearment for me. I'm going to end with this poem. It's called Snapshot 3. He strides over to where I stand, hands me his 35mm Minolta. I don't need it where I am, my father laughs. He straightens his tie, squeezes into his suit jacket. A rabbi and a priest, he says, are stopped by St. Peter at the pearly gates. He stumbles on the punchline. Father, mother, and Babcha float at the base of a mountain beneath a kaleidoscope sky. My mother blows me a coral-colored kiss, checks lipstick in a compact mirror. George cycles out of an elephant-shaped cloud, wearing bike shorts and a purple tie-dyed t-shirt. Babcha fingers her black rosary. Use the right exposure, my father says. Let her do it her way, my mother says. Babcha smiles, cuddles into George, cradles his arm. Take the picture, George says. I don't have all day. Thank you very much.
Woohoo!
Lovely.